for hallucinating. The segment felt wildly inappropriate for primetime cable, and viewer reactions ranged from confused laughter to pure disbelief that anyone in WWE management had approved it. CM Punk punches a fan on Live Raw back in 2012. CM Punk was thriving as the arrogant heel WWE champion, deep in a brutal feud with Ryback. During a heated Raw segment, the action spilled beyond the barricades and straight into crowd. Punk quickly found himself surrounded and overwhelmed by overzealous fans grabbing and shoving him from every direction. Under that intense pressure, his composure broke. He swung hard and connected with a ringside spectator who, by most accounts, wasn't even one of the instigators. Fan cameras captured the punch clearly, and the fallout was immediate. WWE issued a public apology. The fan went to media, and the incident became a defining example of how quickly controlled wrestling chaos can turn genuinely dangerous. Punk later addressed it in interviews, acknowledging regret while explaining the sheer terror of being mobbed by strangers in a confined space. The footage remains available online as a sobering reminder that even disciplined performers have a breaking point. Seth Rollins tackled by a fan on Raw in Brooklyn in 2021 at the Barclays Center in Brooklyn. Seth Rollins was simply walking up the entrance ramp after finishing his segment when a fan vaulted the barricade and launched himself at Rollins like a linebacker, driving him to ground before anyone could react. Cameras caught the entire collision live before quickly cutting away. Security swarmed the attacker immediately, and he was arrested on the spot. What surprised many was Rollins' response afterward. Despite being assaulted on national television, he chose not to press charges. He later spoke about the surreal experience of being attacked in such a public, vulnerable moment. The incident triggered a serious industry-wide conversation about security failures and raised urgent questions about how a fan managed to physically reach a top WWE star during a live broadcast at a major venue. WWE's approach to ringside security was fundamentally reassessed as a direct result. Bret Hart versus Shawn Michaels. The backstage hair-pulling brawl by 1997, the WWF locker room had become a powder keg, and Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels were the lit match. Their mutual contempt had been building for months when Michaels cut a promo strongly implying Bret had been romantically involved with WWF valet Sonny. For Bret, a deeply private family man, dragging his wife and family into a public broadcast was an unforgivable crossing of lines. He confronted Michaels backstage, and the argument exploded into a physical brawl, with Hart taking Michaels down and tearing out a chunk of his famous blonde hair. While not fully captured on broadcast cameras, the evidence was visible for weeks. Michaels appeared on screen sporting a noticeable bald spot. The surrounding era, including Bret's legendary post-Montreal Screwjob meltdown, where he destroyed ringside equipment on camera, made the whole period feel dangerously, unmistakably real. What had begun as a worked rivalry had evolved into a genuine personal war between two men who couldn't stand sharing a building. Randy Orton attacked at a South African house show in 2013. During a WWE house show in Cape Town, South Africa, Randy Orton had just won his match and climbed the turnbuckle to soak in the crowd's appreciation. Then a fan jumped the barricade, slid into the ring, and delivered a real low blow to Orton from behind. True to his training, Orton initially sold the shot as if it were part of the show, until the cold reality hit him and his expression shifted from theatrical agony to genuine, dead-eyed fury. Security flooded the ring. The fan was dragged out and arrested by South African authorities, and the whole thing was captured by fan cameras throughout the arena. What makes the incident so remarkable is the sheer audacity involved. Not just invading the ring, but executing a wrestling-style attack on one of WWE's most decorated stars, mid-celebration, in front of a live crowd. Chris Jericho disrespects a Brazilian flag during a 2012 WWE tour stop in Sao Paulo, Brazil. An enthusiastic fan threw a Brazilian flag into ring as a gesture of respect for Chris Jericho, a common and culturally meaningful tradition. Jericho, fully committed to his heel persona, chose to pick up the flag, crumple it with visible contempt, and kick it across the canvas. The arena's reaction was immediate and volcanic. What had been a passionate, celebratory crowd became something far more dangerous in seconds. WWE suspended Jericho for 30 days, an unusually decisive disciplinary action, and the incident drew commentary from cultural critics, wrestling journalists, and international observers. Fan cameras throughout the venue captured everything, and the footage spread rapidly online. For a performer who had built his career on provocation, Brazil was the moment Jericho discovered exactly where the real boundary of acceptable heel behavior was drawn. Ric Flair in a plane ride from hell in 2002, the WWE roster boarded a chartered flight home from a European tour that would become one of the most notorious nights in wrestling history. While no traditional cameras were rolling, dozens of witnesses were present, and subsequent lawsuits, sworn testimony, and documentary interviews have reconstructed the chaos in remarkable detail. Ric Flair allegedly paraded through the cabin, wearing only his robe, exposing himself to flight attendants and harassing crew members in ways that cannot be described in polite detail. He was far from alone. Heavy drinking transformed the aircraft cabin into something resembling a chaotic fraternity event. Other incidents include a performer reportedly shaving Michael Hayes' hair while he slept, and a backstage confrontation that nearly became a mid-air physical fight requiring Vince McMahon's personal intervention. The legal fallout included significant financial settlements with flight attendants, and the Dark Side of the Ring documentary series dedicated a full episode to the incident, pulling together eyewitness accounts and court documents to paint a comprehensive picture of that catastrophic evening. Joey Styles knocks out JBL. JBL spent years in WWE cultivating a backstage reputation that bore little resemblance to his entertaining on-screen persona. According to numerous colleagues, he engaged in systematic bullying of smaller and less established talent, operating within the locker room's hierarchy with apparent impunity. That impunity ended abruptly when announcer Joey Styles, smaller, bespectacled, cerebral, not remotely known as a fighter, finally reached his absolute limit. According to eyewitnesses, including the late Shad Gaspard, Styles responded to JBL's relentless targeting with a single punch that reportedly left JBL with a visible black eye. The David versus Goliath nature of the moment gave it instant legendary status throughout the wrestling world. Various shoot interviews over the years have revisited the incident with slightly differing details, but the core story remains consistent. Sometimes the person being targeted simply snaps, and the results are more effective than anyone anticipated. The Paige privacy violation of 2017 and 2017, Paige, one of the most prominent faces of the women's wrestling revolution, became the victim of one of the most devastating privacy violations in modern wrestling history, when extremely personal, explicit content recorded privately with partners was stolen and leaked across the internet. She was 24 years old, already dealing with serious injury concerns, and suddenly forced to publicly address an intimate violation in front of a global audience. The emotional damage was profound. Her father, British wrestling legend Ricky Knight, has spoken about how close the ordeal pushed her toward losing her life entirely. What makes the scandal significant beyond the immediate headlines is what it reveals about privacy, consent, and how quickly personal material can be weaponized against people who already live under intense public scrutiny. The content was never meant to be public. Its distribution was both a legal crime and a moral one. In the years since, Paige has rebuilt her life and career with genuine grace, becoming a vocal advocate for online privacy rights and mental health awareness. The broader culture, fan invasions, and on-camera chaos WWE has always operated at the unstable intersection of live performance and real human unpredictability. And that combination has produced an enormous number of moments where the scripted and the unscripted have collided publicly. Titus O'Neil's legendary slip sliding under the ring at WrestleMania became instant viral comedy. The Stone Cold Steve Austin era produced a steady stream of fan interaction moments, some planned, some absolutely not, where his anti-authority persona blurred the line between character and reality in unpredictable ways. Across decades of programming, fans have thrown objects with dangerous force, rushed entrance ramps during pay-per-view broadcasts, and breached security in ways that could have ended far more seriously than they did. Security personnel visibly scrambling across live broadcasts became almost a signature visual of late 1990s WWE programming, a constant reminder that just beyond the controlled camera frame, real chaos was always waiting. Yes, sir, story same Hain. Surf apnea words main leak guy Hain. Sonnet 4. 6. The curtain call incident of 1996. The night kayfabe died in Madison Square Garden, there are moments in professional wrestling history that serve as genuine turning points. Moments where the industry looks at itself in the mirror and realizes that something fundamental has shifted forever. The curtain call, which took place on May 19, 1996 at Madison Square Garden during a non-televised WWE house show, is without question one of those moments. What happened that night was simultaneously beautiful and catastrophic, depending entirely on your perspective and your relationship with the sacred traditions of professional wrestling kayfabe. The setup requires a little context. At the time, the wrestling world was in the middle of a seismic talent shift. Scott Hall and Kevin Nash, two of WWE's biggest stars known as Razor Ramon and Diesel respectively, were leaving the company to sign with WCW in what will become one of the most significant talent departures in the industry's history. Their final night in a WWE ring happened to fall at Madison Square Garden, the most legendary venue in professional wrestling, in front of a crowd that included some of the most passionate and knowledgeable fans in the entire country. After the final match of the evening concluded, something happened that had essentially never occurred before on WWE soil. Hall, Nash, Triple H, and Shawn Michaels, for men who were supposed to be divided into heels and baby faces, enemies and rivals within the fictional world of WWE programming, all gathered in the center of the ring together and embraced in a genuine, emotional farewell. They hugged each other. They acknowledged their real-life friendship openly. They broke every rule of kayfabe preservation that the wrestling business had considered sacred for decades, and they did it in front of a packed Madison Square Garden audience while fan cameras captured every second. The fallout was significant and revealing in equal measure. WWE management was furious. The decision was made that someone had to be punished for the breach, and since Hall and Nash were already gone and Michaels was essentially untouchable due to his championship status, Triple H became the designated recipient of the consequences. His planned King of the Ring push was canceled, setting his singles career back by months in a decision that Triple H himself has discussed extensively in interviews over the years. What makes the curtain call so fascinating in retrospect is how clearly it illustrated the collision between the human reality of genuine friendship and the artificial demands of maintaining a fictional universe. These four men had traveled the world together, worked alongside each other through years of physical punishment and professional pressure, and when two of them were leaving, the human impulse to say goodbye properly simply overwhelmed every professional calculation about character consistency and audience perception. The moment was real in a way that almost nothing else on a wrestling show ever is, and that realness is precisely what made it so controversial and so enduringly memorable. The Undertaker and Shawn Michaels' locker room power struggle throughout the late 1990s and into the 2000s. The WWE locker room operated according to an informal but rigidly enforced hierarchy. And at the very top of that hierarchy sat a group of veterans known colloquially as a clique, and later the various power structures that evolved around the most established performers. The Undertaker, as one of the longest tenured and most respected performers in the company's history, occupied a unique position within this ecosystem, simultaneously outside the political games, and deeply invested in maintaining certain standards of professional conduct. According to numerous accounts from performers who worked during this era, The Undertaker served as something of an unofficial locker room enforcer, a role he took seriously and executed with the quiet authority of someone who understood that his reputation and longevity gave him influence that newer performers simply did not possess. When he felt that standards were slipping, when he believed that established protocols were being disrespected, he was reportedly not shy about making his displeasure known in direct and unambiguous terms. The tension between The Undertaker's traditional approach to the wrestling business and the more politically maneuvering style associated with certain other performers created an undercurrent of genuine backstage drama that occasionally surfaced in ways visible to careful observers of the television product. Performers who crossed The Undertaker's unwritten code of conduct reportedly found themselves on the receiving end of consequences that ranged from cold professional treatment to more direct confrontations. Various shoot interviews and documentaries have explored these dynamics over the years, with former performers describing a backstage environment where The Undertaker's word carried enormous weight, and where his approval or disapproval could meaningfully affect a younger wrestler's experience within the company. The contrast between his supernatural on-screen persona and his role as a pragmatic real-world keeper locker room standards created one of the most fascinating dual identities in the history of the business. Owen Hart and the tragic Blue Blazer incident, no honest accounting of WWE moments that were captured by cameras under circumstances no one intended, can avoid the devastating tragedy of May 23, 1999, at the Kemper Arena in Kansas City, Missouri. What was supposed to be a light-hearted entrance gimmick for Owen Hart's comedic Blue Blazer character became, in the most sudden and horrifying way imaginable, a genuine catastrophe that unfolded in front of a live pay-per-view audience and a television viewership that had absolutely no framework for processing what they were witnessing. Owen Hart was scheduled to be lowered from the arena rafters as part of an elaborate entrance for his match. The equipment failed. Owen fell approximately 78 feet and suffered injuries that proved fatal. He was 34 years old. The cameras in the arena caught the immediate aftermath of the Blue Blazer incident is not a moment of chaos or scandal in the way that other entries on this list are. It is something far more serious and far more permanent. It represents the absolute outer boundary of what can go wrong when live performance intersects with equipment failure. And it serves as a permanent reminder that the performers who entertain millions of people every week are human beings operating in an environment that carries real physical risks with real potentially fatal consequences. Goldberg's stretcher incident, the rage behind the scenes Bill Goldberg's first WWE run in the early 2000s, was marked by a combination of genuine star power and behind-the-scenes tension that occasionally boiled over in ways that created uncomfortable ripples throughout the roster. Goldberg, who had been one of WCW's most dominant attractions, arrived in WWE, carrying the weight of enormous expectations and a particular challenge of integrating into a locker room culture that was significantly different from the environment he had thrived in previously. The most infamous incident from this period involved an altercation with Brock Lesnar that went considerably beyond the boundaries of professional cooperation. During the build to their WrestleMania XX match, a bout that was already complicated by the fact that both men were widely reported to be leaving the company, creating a crowd dynamic where neither man received the reception the match deserved. The relationship between Goldberg and Lesnar deteriorated in ways that spilled into genuine hostility. Reports from the period describe an environment of mutual disrespect and professional contempt that made the physical cooperation required to execute safe and compelling matches increasingly difficult to maintain. The WrestleMania XX match itself, performed in front of Madison Square Garden crowd that spent the entire bout chanting for both men to leave, stands as one of the most uncomfortable main event experiences in the history of the Showcase of the Immortals. Behind the scenes during this period, Goldberg's intensity and his particular approach to professional conduct created friction with various members of the roster and management structure. Cameras caught glimpses of the tension in backstage segments that were supposed to be straightforward promotional material, but carried an undercurrent of genuine unease that attentive viewers could detect. The Montreal Screwjob's full backstage aftermath, while the Montreal Screwjob itself, Vince McMahon ordering referee Earl Hebner to ring the bell while Bret Hart was locked in Shawn Michaels' sharpshooter at Survivor Series 1997, has been analyzed from virtually every conceivable angle over the nearly 3 decades since it occurred. The immediate backstage aftermath deserves its own focused examination as one of the most genuinely dramatic series of events ever captured in wrestling. Context: the moment the bell rang and Bret Hart realized what had happened, the carefully maintained boundary between professional performance and raw human emotion dissolved completely. Hart spat in Vince McMahon's face in the ring, a real gesture of genuine contempt rather than any scripted action. He then went backstage and proceeded to destroy everything within reach, smashing television monitors and equipment with the focused fury of a man who felt completely and utterly betrayed after years of loyalty and professional service. Cameras caught portions of this destruction. The footage that exists from the immediate post-Screwjob period backstage shows an environment of absolute chaos. People running, officials trying to manage the situation, and Hart at the center of it all expressing his rage in the most physical terms available to him in that moment. What followed was even more dramatic. Vince McMahon went to Hart's locker room to speak with him. What happened in that room has been described by multiple witnesses and by Hart and McMahon themselves in various documentaries and interviews. But the most significant detail is that Hart reportedly punched McMahon during this encounter. A real punch, delivered by a man who felt genuinely betrayed, connected with the face of the man he held responsible for one of the most humiliating professional experiences of his career. The documentary Wrestling with Shadows, which had cameras embedded with Bret Hart throughout the period leading up to Montreal,